What's up, YouTube? This is your boy Thomas back again with another rendition of Truth Be Told. There wasn't a lot going on this past week as far as the news-wise go, except for, the left are still destroying America. I hope everyone had a good 4th of July. I did get around to watching quite a few movies this past week. Newer releases. The first one I want to talk about, I finally got to watch A Quiet Place Part 2. Now, I was a little disappointed because the way the trailer made it look like they were going to go back to the beginning of when it all started, when the aliens first showed up and that kind of thing, but you only get about 5 or 10 minutes of that at the very beginning of the movie. The father's only in it for that first few minutes, and then after that is a continuation from the first one. For whatever reason, the family decides to leave the farm. It made no sense, but I figured they'd stay there, but no, they decide to leave for whatever reason. The daughter had been looking over these maps or whatever her father created, and he'd been listening to radio transmissions from a particular island not too far off from where they're at, and she figures that that's where they think they should go. They get to another area where there's another survivor. It's a neighbor of theirs, a good friend. He had a family, but they're all gone. He's the only one left. They try to tell him about this radio transmission, and he claims that there's nobody there. It doesn't exist. But yet they can hear it on the radio when they play it on the radio. But he claims that there's nobody there. The girl doesn't believe him. She leaves everybody behind and takes off to find this place. The mother freaks out, Emily Blunt. She tells the guy to please go get her and bring her back. He goes after her. There's a couple scenes where they have to deal with the aliens. The mother's went to go get medicine for the baby. When she comes back, they have to deal with an alien there, and then the guy and the deaf girl, they have to deal with a couple of aliens. One not too far off from the train yard where he's been hiding, and then the next, some kind of outpost or whatever, like a train station. And then they have to deal with another one at the boat docks, because she refuses to go back until he proves to her that there's no one on that island. So he decides to take her there to show her. There's a group of people, survivors, that try to attack them. But a couple more aliens show up and kill everybody, but then they get away on a boat and float over to the island. A couple of the things, aliens followed them. They end up finding a community there that's been following the radio transmission and survivors, but a couple of aliens followed them on another boat. They floated on a boat to the island. Supposedly these alien things, they can't swim, they hate water, but they were smart enough to stay on top of a boat to get to the island, and then they eventually kill them off, the aliens or whatever, but not before the aliens end up killing a bunch of the survivors. But they know they need to go back and get the mother and the other two kids. Now, the way they do this is, again, like in the first one, she sticks the earpiece into a microphone and pumps it out to where the aliens can hear over the radio station. The boy, he was listening to the radio when the aliens showed up down there where him and his mother is at, and he uses that to kill that alien. So both the kids are basically growing up as alien hunters or killers or whatever, and that's where they end up in the movie. So you know there's going to be a part 3. It was okay. It's not as good as the first one, but it's alright. I think it could have been done way better. But it's alright for a watch. It's kind of a dumb idea with the whole hearing thing. I mean, I don't know, it just doesn't seem likely. But other than that, the movie's alright. It wasn't too bad. Not as good as the first one, but okay. They leave it off for a third one, so you know the third one's coming. And hopefully they wrap it up. Now, the next one that I saw, I finally just got done watching the sequel to Hitman's Bodyguard. It's called Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Of course, it's got Ryan Reynolds and Samuel Jackson. They return for their roles. And of course, Salma Hayek, she's of course plays the wife of Samuel Jackson's character, the Hitman. You know, that woman may be 50 some years old, but she still looks pretty damn good. Anyways, basically, they're on their honeymoon, the Hitman and his wife, and they get Kincaid gets kidnapped, Samuel Jackson's character, and she goes and grabs Bryce, which is Ryan's character, to help get him back. She thinks he's been kidnapped by like the Italian mafia or some shit. So they're in Italy. So she gets him to try to help her get Samuel Jackson free from the mafia. Only problem is Ryan's character Bryce is taking kind of like a sabbatical, supposedly. You know, he's not doing any guns or anything. He's not doing any bodyguarding, supposedly, because that's what his therapist told him to do. So he figured that's what he was going to do. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. So he ends up helping them. And then come to find out everybody's after them. Because they took some murk off this guy. And then Antonio Banderas is playing this evil villain or whatever who wants to blow up half of Europe or whatever, or some shit like that, or knock out all the electronics and transmissions. That, I don't know, something like that to that point. He's basically playing like a Bond villain. So they end up having to go after him and stopping him. Come to find out, Morgan Freeman is his or Ryan Reynolds' stepdad. You don't like him very well. He ends up having to fight him and kill him too, which is kind of dumb. And then at the very end, the Hitman and his wife is trying to have a baby. They can't have a baby. So they think about adopting, but instead they got to trick Ryan, or well, Samuel L. Jackson doesn't, but Salma Hayek's character tricks Ryan Reynolds into signing adoption papers for him to be their adopted son, and that's the end of the movie. It's pretty silly. It's pretty dumb. It was okay. It had some funny scenes in it, but I like the first one way better. The second one's okay. The thing I like about this one better than I do the first one is you got to see way more Salma Hayek. But other than that, it wasn't nearly as funny. I thought it was okay, but the first one's way funnier. Would I recommend either one of these? Yeah, they're okay. They're not bad. 2 thumbs up to both of them. They're decent movies. Go ahead and check them out. Both A Quiet Place Part 2 and The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Check them out. They're not bad movies. Alright, let's move on to your B-movie review. Alright, Movieholics. This week is Fantasy Week. This week we chose a couple of Italian films. Now, there's a couple of Italian directors that would kind of do knockoffs of a lot of the fantasy movies that were being done over here in the 80s. And some of them got some recognition. Now, I'm not gonna lie, they're cheesy as fuck. They seriously are cheesy. But some of them turned out fairly decent. Others, not so well. So you did a lot. There was a lot of hits and misses with the Italian films of the 80s. A lot more misses than there were hits. But there were some fairly decent ones. The first one I talk about is called The Throne of Fire, which was done in 1983. It starred Pietro Torri, which most people know him as Peter McCoy. And of course, the one they seem to use quite often as the lead lady over there, Sabrina Ciani. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She's very good looking blonde back then. They used her a lot in their films, mostly the whole fantasy barbarian type films. Sword sorcery stuff, that's what she usually was the leading lady in. This movie is basically about, supposedly Satan comes and visits this woman, tells her that she is going to have his child and that he shall rule. But there's a prophecy. He has to take the throne at a certain point in time. And it's an obscure prophecy, like something to do with dark and light and blah blah blah, which you later find out he's talking about an eclipse. He has until that moment to take the throne. So basically, she has the child. She turns into a witch, and she tries to help him take the throne. A throne that belongs to a good king or whatever. In order to take the throne, it has to be someone who's a blood relative of this king. The king has, of course, a daughter, which is of course played by Sabrina. So he has to marry the daughter in order to be able to take the throne of fire. Now, the throne of fire is literally a throne of fire. It's a seat, it's a throne, but if someone sits in it and they're not of the blood of the family, the ruling family, they actually burn up. It turns into fire and then burns them up. So that's why he has to marry the daughter, so he can become part of the family. Now, of course, the kingdom's magician or wizard or whatever you want to call him, chancellor, is a son as well. He's supposed to be the hero that saves the kingdom, blah blah blah, which is of course played by Peter, which he eventually does, of course. He eventually, at first it's like no matter what he does, he can't stop this guy from taking the throne. But he eventually figures out a way, tricks the guy, and then the guy kind of ends up killing himself. So he saves the day. And then he pretty much becomes king. And, you know, her the queen. So that's the end of the movie. It's your typical sword and sorcery fantasy scenario. That's why it was kind of a knockoff, like the Conan movies and shit like that. It was okay. It was watchable. The acting wasn't really all that bad. It wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't all that bad. I give the acting probably a good 3, because it's better than most Italian films, honestly. Special effects, I give it a -3. It's okay, but it's still kind of cheesy and lame. Costumes and sets, they were just okay, whatever. They were cheesy. The story was typical, so I give it a -3. We've seen it 100 times. Overall, the entire movie, I'll give it a 3, a solid 3, just because it was decent enough to watch. It was a decent Italian film. If you're into, you know, the 80s sword and sorcery, go ahead and give it a watch. Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't horrible. So, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down. Go ahead and give it a watch. It was okay. For a one-time watch. The next one I want to talk about, it too is an Italian film, and it was done in 1983 as well. Just like the first one, though, there was no box office numbers. I mean, it's an Italian film. I never heard of this, but it seems some people have. It's called Hearts in Armour. Starred Rick Edwards, and of course, I definitely knew who Tanya Roberts was when I saw that she was in the film. She's pretty hard to mistake back then. She was definitely a looker. But she was the leading lady in this. Now the movie is kind of like some type of romantic adventure set in like during the Crusades, medieval times. I don't know. It was weird. It's kind of strange. You basically had like a set of knights, and one of them kind of falls in love with Tanya Roberts, which she plays a Moor princess. The Moor prince falls in love with a woman that you see at the very beginning of the movie who's talking to like some type of oracle or such, who gives her this prophecy about a Christian killing a Moor that she ends up falling in love for. I'm not sure if she's noble or what she is, but towards the beginning of the movie, she ends up in a state where these guys are trying to rape her or some shit. And this guy in armor or knight shows up and pretty much fucking chops off like different body parts of these guys or whatever, and then tells her if she takes the armor and the sword, she will be invincible. So when she goes to check the armor, it's empty. There's no one in it. So that made no sense whatsoever. So she dons the armor and the sword. The same thing tries to happen to the Moor princess by Tanya Roberts, and she shows up in the armor and the sword. She ends up beating the men who tried to rape her as well. She eventually runs across the knights, the other 4 or 5 knights. That's like part of a crusade or something. I don't know. They just seem to be hanging out in this one area through pretty much the entire movie. And each one of them, it's so silly. It's so cheesy. Each one of them has this weird ass helmet with this weird ass huge symbol on top of it. It looks retarded. It's so silly. For some reason, she ends up fighting one of them because she won't tell them who she is. And then when she does tell them who she is, they're all like, oh, it's a woman, blah, 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 blah. Which, again, for some reason it made no sense, because she was like this girly girl, and then all of a sudden she dons the armor and she's a knight. What the fuck, you know? It made no sense whatsoever. And then she could beat other knights who are far better trained in swordplay than she is. So it made entirely no sense. Now you also have this goofy magician dude. For some odd reason, he wants to save the prince, the Moor prince, because he cut him down from a tree instead of killing him. Which, again, makes no sense. This magician dude, weird ass magician dude, starts helping the Moor prince, which I don't get either. The female knight lets the Moor princess go instead of being a captive anymore. And she runs across some kind of holy man or whatever, who has this crystal that allows him to become invisible if he puts it in his mouth. She takes the crystal and becomes invisible. Now the Moor king, he sends, after the prince, he sends these other three supposed they're not really knights, they're more like medieval hitmen or some shit. He sends them after, and of course they all got fucked up looking helmets too. And then somehow and point in the movie they decide to have some kind of contest between the two kings, the European king, the Christian king, and the Moor king. They decide to have the contest, 4 or 5 of their best knights against the other one, which you meet throughout the movie. They all come together, and honestly, it's the main Christian knight, Orlando or whatever. He's literally doing most of the killing and fighting through this entire movie, and into this battle. I mean, he pretty much fights and kills them all, except for one. There's one where the two knights, this other knight, he fights them and they end up killing each other. The prophecy doesn't come true. He kills the woman in the armor. She thinks he kills the Moor prince, but come to find out it's not. It's some other woman who was in love with the Moor prince, but he wasn't in love with her. The Christians end up winning over the Moors, and then they both decide to leave the Moor prince, the Moor princess, a Christian man, and the woman with the magical armor at the end of the movie. They all are in love and happily ever after and right off in the sunset. I'm telling you, this movie makes entirely no sense whatsoever. It's really fucking weird. They just jumble shit together, and they all hang out in this one little area throughout the entire movie. It's dumb, it's cheesy. If you like that kind of shit, more power to you. It made no sense to me whatsoever. The only good part of this entire movie was Tanya Roberts. The rest of it was fucking retarded. I do not recommend this one. This one was really badly done. 2 thumbs down for sure. The acting, yeah, a -3 on the acting. It wasn't all that great. You understood what was going on, but it's still the special effects is definitely a 2. They had some pretty cheesy special effects, just making people disappear and that kind of shit. As far as the story goes, I really couldn't tell a whole lot what was going on. All I knew was, you know, who was romantically involved with the other. That's literally all I could tell. The story made no sense whatsoever. It really didn't. Definitely a 2 on the story. Overall, this movie gets a -3 for me. It was not very good at all. I understood kind of half-assed what was going on, but a lot of it made you question what the fuck, you know. It was strange, really strange. Again, I do not recommend this movie. It was terrible. Even for a cheese flick, it was terrible. I don't know why they got reviews on it saying that it was good. It was not good at all. Anyways, that's all I have for you this week. Tune in next week. I will be reviewing Tomorrow's War, and a couple of sci-fi classics. Thoughts about what I talked about, the first 2 movies at the beginning of this video, or leave your thoughts down in the comment section down below. If you have any suggestions of maybe some movies I've never heard of, or underrated movies that you think I might have never seen, please leave your suggestions down in the comments down below, and I'll get to reviewing them as soon as I can. Until next time, I told you to be told the truth, and you've just been told.